Right now, you feel a headache coming on. You walk to the cabinet, grab a pill, swallow it with water, and forget about it. That cabinet has existed for maybe 100 years. Before that, getting sick was a completely different problem. Not an inconvenience, a death sentence, and what your ancestors did to survive it, most people alive today couldn't even watch. Let's go back, way back, 300,000 years ago on the African savanna. You wake up and something is wrong. Your throat burns, your body aches, your head is pounding. There is no cabinet. There is no doctor. There is no one who even knows what a fever is. There is just you, the fire, and whatever the person next to you knows how to do. So what did they do? The first thing your ancestors reached for wasn't a tool. It wasn't a plant. It was dirt. Clay specifically. They ate it, rubbed it on wounds, pressed it into infected skin. This sounds insane until you realize they didn't invent this. They copied it. Elephants eat clay when their stomachs are upset. Chimpanzees rub specific leaves on infected wounds. Parrots in the Amazon fly hundreds of miles just to eat clay from riverbanks. Dozens of species do this because it works. Clay absorbs toxins, reduces inflammation, pulls bacteria out of wounds. And here's something strange. That instinct is still alive in you right now. Some pregnant women get intense cravings to eat dirt, chalk, or clay. Doctors call it pica. For a long time, they thought it was a disorder. Now researchers think it's a 3 million-year-old survival program that never got turned off. Your body still remembers. But clay was just the beginning. Because your ancestors didn't just have dirt. They had an entire pharmacy growing around them. They just didn't know that's what it was. In 2019, archaeologist Karen Hardy analyzed plants recovered from 7 prehistoric sites across the Near East, sites spanning 790,000 years of human history. She identified 212 plant species. Around 60% of them had both medicinal and edible properties. Willow bark. They chewed it for pain. The active compound in willow bark is salicin. Your body converts salicin into salicylic acid. That is the same compound in aspirin. They didn't know any of that. They just knew that when your head hurt, you chewed the bark and it helped. Moldy bread pressed onto infected wounds. Ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient China, all of them independently discovered that mold fought infection. We now know why. Mold produces penicillin. Alexander Fleming didn't invent that in 1928. He just figured out what your ancestors already knew 50,000 years earlier. Garlic for infections. Honey packed into wounds. Certain mushrooms brewed into teas. The prehistoric pharmacy was real, and some of it worked better than anything else available for the next 10,000 years. But here's where it gets darker. Because not every illness could be fixed with a plant. Some people had headaches that never stopped, seizures that came without warning, behaviors so strange and violent that no one could explain them. Your ancestors had a solution for this too. They drilled a hole in your skull. This procedure is called trepanation, and it is the oldest surgical operation ever discovered. The idea was simple. Something evil is trapped inside your head. A demon, a spirit, a curse. The only way to get it out is to open a door. So they did. Using sharpened flint, obsidian, or bone tools, prehistoric surgeons scraped, cut, and bored through the human skull. Without anesthesia. Without sterile tools. Without any understanding of infection. Just a sharp rock and a belief that this was the only way. Trepaned skulls have been found in France, Britain, Peru, Russia, and across Europe. Some of them are over 7,000 years old. The oldest evidence pushes back even further, to around 10,000 BCE. But here's what nobody expected. When researchers examined those skulls, many of them showed something remarkable. The bone had grown back, new tissue, smooth edges, clear signs of healing. The patient survived, not just survived the procedure. Survived for months, sometimes years. One skull found in France showed evidence of 3 separate trepanation procedures. 3 holes drilled into the same skull. 3 times that person sat still while someone cut into their head. And 3 times they lived. Whatever they used to manage the pain, and researchers believe it was a combination of psychoactive plants, alcohol fermented from wild fruits, and possibly certain fungi, it was enough. Because they kept doing it, for thousands of years, across multiple continents, independently. Cultures that never met each other all arrived at the same conclusion. When the head is the problem, you open the head. But surgery wasn't always the answer. Sometimes the damage was somewhere else entirely. And in 2023, a discovery in a cave in Borneo changed everything we thought we knew about prehistoric medicine. Researchers found a skeleton 31,000 years ago with no antibiotics, no antiseptics, no surgical steel. Someone looked at an infected or damaged leg and made a decision that no human should have had to make. Cut it off or watch this person die. They chose to cut. And then they kept that person alive through weeks of recovery. Cleaned the wound, managed the infection somehow, fed them, watched them, stayed. The teenager grew up, walked on that stump, lived a full life. This is the oldest known surgical amputation in human history. And it happened in a cave, by people we still sometimes call primitive. But here's what's interesting. Surgery and plants were only part of what your ancestors had, because when everything else failed, they went to one person, the shaman. In almost every prehistoric society ever studied, across every continent, every culture, every time period, there was one individual whose job it was to deal with sickness. Not just with medicine, with ritual, with fire and smoke and chanting and dance, with altered states of consciousness. Evidence of psychoactive plants used in healing rituals has been found dating back at least 8,000 years in the Sahara. Psilocybin mushrooms, cannabis, certain cacti. The shaman would consume them, enter a different state of mind, and use that state to diagnose and treat. This sounds like superstition. It sounds like theater. But here's what modern science has spent the last 30 years quietly confirming. Belief is medicine. The placebo effect is not fake. It is a real, measurable, biological process. When you genuinely believe you are being healed, your brain releases endorphins, reduces cortisol, lowers inflammation, and accelerates tissue repair. The shaman wasn't fooling anyone. They were triggering a real response in a real body, using the most powerful pharmacy that has ever existed, the one inside your own skull. And the ritual wasn't just for the sick person, it was for everyone watching. When the whole group gathered, when the fire burned, when the shaman worked, everyone believed. And that collective belief, that certainty that this person would be taken care of, may have been as powerful as anything else in the prehistoric medicine kit. Because here's the thing about getting sick 300,000 years ago. The most dangerous part wasn't the illness, it was being alone. Neanderthal burial sites have revealed individuals who survived severe injuries for years. A man with a withered arm, a crushed eye socket, arthritis so advanced he could barely move. These injuries didn't kill him, which means someone else kept him alive. Someone fed him when he couldn't hunt. Someone carried him when he couldn't walk. Someone decided that this person's life was worth the cost. In a world where every calorie was survival, caring for the sick and injured was an enormous investment. It cost the group, it slowed them down, it risked everyone, and they did it anyway. The average life expectancy in prehistoric times was 25 to 40 years. Not because people aged faster, because the margin for error was zero. A broken leg was a death sentence unless someone helped. An infected wound killed you, unless someone knew what to press against it. A fever broke you in 2 days, unless someone stayed up through the night keeping you warm. Medicine, for most of human history, was not a profession. It was not a building. It was not a pill. It was a person sitting next to you and refusing to leave. And tonight, when you feel that headache coming on and you walk to that cabinet, the pill you're holding is the end of a very long story. A story that started with a chimpanzee pressing a leaf onto a wound, moved through someone chewing willow bark in the dark, passed through a shaman dancing around a fire, went through hands that drilled into skulls with flint, through a teenager in Borneo who lost a leg and lived anyway, through 1,000 generations of people who had nothing and still found a way to keep each other alive. You have no idea what that cost.